Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into the fascinating mechanics of interstate relations. Think about it. In a massive federal structure like ours, our 28 states operate a whole lot like siblings living under one giant roof. They have to balance shared resources, deal with overlapping budgets, and advocate for their own local interests. As you can imagine, keeping the peace requires some serious constitutional referees, and that is exactly what we're going to explore today.
So you might be wondering, how on earth do 28 states share one country without constantly being at each other's throats over money and water? Just like in any family, sibling rivalries are totally inevitable. You might have one state demanding a bigger share of river water for its farmers, while the state right next door is trying to protect its local industries from competition. It's an incredibly delicate balancing act. We have to ensure each region can thrive, but without suffocating the national union as a whole. Well, the answer really boils down to a concept called sine qua non. It's a fancy Latin phrase that means an indispensable and essential condition, literally without which it is not possible. When we talk about our federalism, cooperation both between the center and the states and among the states themselves is the absolute sine qua non, because without this continuous, ongoing cooperation, a living, breathing administrative structure like ours simply cannot survive. To see how this cooperation practically functions, here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the engine of federalism, then look at how we resolve river water disputes, examine the Interstate Council, explore the rules of free trade and commerce, and finally, wrap up with the zonal councils for harmony. Let's jump right in.
Okay, part one, the engine of federalism. As we'll see, constant coordination is the absolute key to keeping our federal system running smoothly.
Moving right along to part two, resolving river water disputes. Since shared water is arguably our most visceral source of tension, Article 262 actually removes these conflicts from standard Supreme Court jurisdiction. And these aren't just minor disagreements, guys. We are talking about massive water wars. For instance, you've got 4 different states pulling at the Krishna River. Odisha and Chhattisgarh locked in a tense dispute over the Mahanadi, and of course, a fierce multi-state battle over the Kaveri. Because your everyday judges might not fully grasp the deep geographical and agricultural nuances of sharing a river basin, these disputes are handed over to specialized ad hoc tribunals instead of the standard courts. But there has been a glaring issue with these tribunals: 17. That number represents the 17 grueling years from 1990 all the way to 2007 that the Kaveri Water Dispute Tribunal took just to deliver a judgment. Literally, an entire generation grew up while the states simply waited for a framework on how to share the water. This sluggishness proved, without a doubt, that the system was heavily delayed and desperately needed fixing.
To fix these massive delays, the government proposed some critical amendments back in 2019. Under the old rules, a tribunal had an initial 3 years to make a decision, which almost always got stretched to 6 years. And honestly, even then, things just dragged on. But the proposed timeline is radically faster. We're looking at a strict 18-month limit for pre-tribunal negotiations. And if they can't agree, the tribunal must deliver its decision in just 2 years, with a hard maximum extension of 1.5 years. They're essentially trying to cut the wait time in half to speed up peace between the states.
Right, on to part 3, the Interstate Council. Under Article 263, this is the constitutional family meeting where everyone gets in a room to talk out issues before they become crises. So, who actually gets a seat at this massive family table? Well, the Prime Minister acts as the chairman, and he's joined by 6 core cabinet ministers, including the Home Minister. Plus, you have the chief ministers of literally all the states and the administrators of the Union territories. It is a huge gathering. But here's the crucial takeaway. This massive body investigates, it discusses, and it recommends. That's it. It is purely advisory. It does not hand down binding legal judgments. It operates entirely on finding common ground through dialogue. Next up, Part 4, Free Trade and Commerce. Let's look at how our states manage their economic borders and trade without suffocating each other with local taxes. You see, our economic unity has a very distinct legal foundation. Under Article 301, the freedom of trade, commerce, and intercourse is guaranteed throughout the entire territory of India, and this applies to everyone. Plus, it is completely immune to being suspended during a national emergency, which effectively breaks down those border barriers to create one giant unified market. Now, compare that to Article 19(1)(g).
That one guarantees the freedom to practice a profession, but it's reserved for citizens only, and it actually can be suspended during emergencies. However, this freedom of trade isn't 100% absolute. Think about a tomato scarcity. Tomatoes are super perishable, right? They have a very short shelf life. If there's a massive national shortage, Parliament has the power, under Article 302, to step in and restrict the flow of those goods between states in the public interest. They can legally say, hey, these tomatoes need to stay local, preventing them from rotting on trucks crossing the country and effectively stopping an immediate localized food crisis. Finally, Part 5, Zonal Councils for Harmony. Moving slightly beyond these strict constitutional bodies, these statutory councils were set up specifically to arrest toxic regionalism and build integration. Back in 1956, the States Reorganizations Act essentially carved the map into 5 distinct zones: Northern, Southern, Eastern, Western, and Central. Each zone gets its own council, chaired by the Home Minister, where neighboring states can sit together and coordinate regional infrastructure, things like cross-border highways or shared power grids. And to complete the puzzle, a separate act in 1971 added the Northeastern Council to address the highly unique security and developmental needs of the 7 sister states and Sikkim. Through all of these moving parts, Article 261 really serves as the ultimate unifier. It mandates that full faith and credit must be given everywhere in India to the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of the Union and of every single state. What does that mean practically? Well, if a civil court in Rajasthan issues a final judgment or an official in Kerala generates a public record, it is universally respected in UP, Gujarat, and everywhere else. It totally binds the legal fabric of the nation together, so we aren't constantly verifying each other's paperwork. So, we've explored the complex machinery that keeps our 28-state siblings living peacefully under one roof, from water tribunals and family-style councils to the laws of unified trade. But I want to leave you with this final thought. With the demands on our shared resources, especially water and capital, growing so rapidly, are our constitutional referees actually fast enough and adaptable enough to keep the peace in the future? It's definitely something to ponder. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.